I thought about those words 1 year prior to that lady when she said, how will they know that they're loved? And here I am doing, it's the most trivial, smallest, tiniest thing of putting tomato sauce in a heart shape on top of an egg. And it reminded me, one of my favorite quotes is, to do small things with great love is a great thing. And I thought, it's such a small thing, tomato sauce in a heart shape for these children. But in that moment, I thought that is to show them that they're loved.
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way.
Hello. Today we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by the incredible Thérèse Nichols. Thérèse's story is one of inspiration and determination, fueled by the values instilled into her by her family and the joy of the daily meals around the dinner table. Her adventures around the world took a dramatic turn when she witnessed the devastating child poverty in the Philippines. Deeply moved, she returned home to start her own charity, dedicated to making a difference in the lives of these children. Get ready to be inspired by Thérèse's mission and goodwill, and learn how her latest fundraising initiative is making big waves in London's culinary scene. There's Another Way. Before we dive into today's episode, are you the chef in your home? Join us in making a difference with OnePlate, an amazing global charity partnering with restaurants, cafes and chefs to fund sustainable food projects in Africa and Asia. By celebrating the joy of food, OnePlate provides hope, love and support to children in desperate need. Introducing Brunch in London, a brand new cookbook by OnePlate, a must-have for brunch lovers. Enjoy over 100 recipes from London's top chefs, including Jamie Oliver, Angela Hartnett, Rick Stein, and Heston Blumenthal. This beautiful cookbook will elevate your cooking while supporting OnePlate's food security projects. And the best bit? 100% of all proceeds go directly towards empowering communities in developing countries to grow and secure their own food. Please visit oneplate.co, select our cookbooks, choose London, choose your shipping preference and get your very own copy. I've got mine and it's absolutely stunning, and we're making a difference to those in desperate need. Now, on with the show. Well, hello everyone. We're absolutely delighted to be here joined by Thérèse Nichols. And I have to say, Thérèse, I think you definitely win the award for travelling the furthest to come and see us face to face. Coming all the way from Melbourne to see us is an absolute honour. I know you've been here for another reason, which we'll go into in a minute. But yeah, we're delighted that you're here with us today. How are you doing?
Absolute pleasure. It's wonderful to be here and a joy to be in the country in England.
Oh, fantastic. And that's great to have you. And Thérèse is the co-founder of OnePlate charitable organisation, which is doing some absolutely incredible things, which we're going to hear all about today. And yeah, I guess we're looking forward to hearing all about it. And we've got this beautiful cookbook on the side as well, which we're going to look at in a little while, which has just launched, and the reason why you're over in London for this amazing cookbook launch. So looking forward to hearing all about that as well. So great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much.
So I guess we'll start, if we can, maybe just heading back a bit into childhood and find out a little bit about growing up and how that was and what got you over to London to be launching this cookbook. And there's lots of stories along the way, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah. So, well, it's a joy to be here. So thank you so much for asking me. So as you mentioned, I grew up in Australia. I actually grew up in the country just outside of Melbourne.
Okay.
In a tiny little place, 2 hours in the country, and had a really beautiful childhood living in the country, beautiful family, and quite, in a way, removed from the world, being in the middle of really nowhere. and just really enjoying that childhood of being in the country, just in nature, and parents who hadn't actually really travelled out of Australia at all, but at the same time around the family dining table, which was really the central part of our home, was the kitchen table and meal times. Really, that was where the world opened up to us. And so even though we were in the middle of nowhere in the country in Australia, Mum and Dad were great learners and were always very open to learning about the world, about different countries, and particularly Mum would always be reading articles. She'd always have an article at the dinner table about somebody who is doing some amazing thing on the other side of the world to help other people. And nearly every dinner there was a story about somebody who was doing something for others and about the kindness of humanity. And I think from a young age, hearing these stories of what Mum and Dad would be telling us about these amazing people around the world, I was always inspired by the kindness and generosity and the potential of a human person. So we were far removed, but the world seemed to come to the dining room table every night through the stories of what Mum and Dad would share. And I think also through my grandparents, who were big travellers. One of my first memories of my grandmother was when I was 5 years of age and my grandparents were going overseas. So to travel from Australia to Europe is, if you're lucky, 22 hours, up to 30 hours if you've got a long layover somewhere in Asia. So it's a long, long way. And they were boarding a plane to travel to the UK, and my parents took us down to the airport to say goodbye to them. And my first memory of my grandmother was saying goodbye to her at Tullamarine Airport in Melbourne. And she was all dressed up. She had pearls on, stilettos, lipstick, perfume for a 25-hour flight. And I was just so impressed. I was amazed. I remember just looking at her going, wow, she's so glamorous. And it wasn't until a few years later that the penny dropped. I was like, wow, she was getting on a plane for 24 hours in stilettos. That's even more amazing. And so they travelled a lot while I was growing up. And every time they came back, they would come back with these amazing stories of the countries that they had travelled to. And they would be bringing us back beautiful gifts that were related to that country. And so I think that really gave me this, I suppose, understanding and curiosity and intrigue for what was beyond our little country village in Australia and what was out there. So that really instilled this passion for travel and countries. And then definitely my parents, who are so amazing, and both of them are my greatest inspiration, really instilled in me this, I suppose, a great love for people and a great love for the potential of what we can do for others.
Oh,
amazing! I'm just literally sitting, listening to you talking, just like picturing this scene that you're creating.
Me too. It's an idyllic place in the countryside. I love the fact. Well, there's so much to look at in what you just that little opening bit. But I love the vision of you all being in this lovely idyllic remote place, but all coming together at the dinner table. And then the fact that your mum used to drip feed you stories about kindness of strangers or things that are doing amazing things in different parts of the world, and really kind of getting your mind ticking of a greater world out there. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it was really that kitchen table. It was so, and my dad still says to this day, our dining room table is the most important piece of furniture in the whole house. And it was that dining room table they still have it, and every time I go there for dinner, I love it. I love touching it. It's got scratches and marks all over it, but there is something so beautiful about it because that is our childhood. That is where we grew up. It was our formation. It's where we learnt so much. It was where the conversations happened, and our dinners were never a quick eat and leave and go and watch TV. It was never that at all. It was the dinner was always a place and space for deep conversation and sharing. And mum was a stay-at-home mum, so she had the time and the hours to prepare food and cook and to be able to. It's a real gift, and I think I appreciate it more now than at the time. I probably obviously took it for granted growing up, but now looking back and seeing how precious those memories were, sitting around that dining room table, eating mum's beautiful home cooking, and just even, it was a simple house. We grew up in a very, very simple way, but just the open fire burning and the smell of that really, really was so beautiful.
Did you have a big family, small family, or brothers and sisters?
Yes, a big family, 4 brothers and 1 sister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was always a lot of fun, and there was always something going on.
And did all your siblings have that internationally focused mindset from the stories that your parents used to tell you at the dinner table?
Yeah, they actually do, and which is so interesting. Everyone has been big travellers and travelled all over the world and so many different experiences. And mum and dad, my dad just loves Australia. He's Australian through and through, and he could get in the car and do a road trip for days and just walk the bush. Loves it.
Amazing.
So both of them haven't really travelled much out of Australia. But it's us that have gone out, and then we come back to the dining room table and share our stories. Oh. And so my dad he loves hearing the stories, and he always feels like when we go, we carry him with us, really, and he feels like he is on the journey with us when we share our stories and photos and messages on WhatsApp.
It's beautiful. I love the fact that you reconvene after you travel and come back and all get together, and that's lovely.
Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. So you can see from your childhood, that's where your love for travel kind of really started with the stories and things like that. So and then what happened next? The school, and what happened after?
School. I went to school at Loreto in Ballarat, and really, really loved school. Went on to university. I studied public relations in Melbourne, and my first job doing PR was fantastic, but I just saved every dollar so I could go on my first trip.
Okay.
And that was my goal, to come to Europe. So I suppose my desire for travel was actually coming to Europe. I had this desire there was something about Europe that really drew me. It was the beauty, and for me, I've always been drawn by beauty, just not the aesthetics, but beauty in every sense of the world, the beauty of people, the beauty of culture, and then obviously the aesthetics of Europe, the architecture, the food, the interiors. There's been something in that. So saving and moved to the UK. So came to London for 2 years with a group of school and uni friends. It was the dream of so many Australians who have the experience to get the 2-year working visa. This Australian UK that seems to be reciprocal back.
Although it's always a year going the other way for us for some reason.
Yeah.
It always used to fascinate me. You meet someone in a bar in Birmingham and they're on their working holiday visa. I was thinking, but you've left a beautiful place in Sydney. But I guess it's the curiosity of the other side of the world, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. And I think London is such a great base for Australians to go out and see Europe. Yeah. So I did quite a bit of travel and absolutely loved it and just learnt so much. I mean, for me, I'm such a visual learner, and the way I experience and learn is through travel and meeting different people and experiencing the beauty of different cultures. So that 2 years based in the UK opened up the world of Europe for me, which was, again, another such a great basis of my learning and formation on so many different levels.
And what other highlights did you have in your time in Europe? What stands out? Which countries and cultures do you remember?
Oh my goodness, so many. I mean, France, I definitely have a special affiliation with. And it's funny, I've never done one of those ancestry tests. But I wonder if I did, if I had a bit of French.
Especially the way they pronounce your name.
Yeah, I know, it's a French name. I'm like, there must be something there. Yeah. So, yeah, I definitely, France was, is a place that I keep getting drawn to. Yeah. So it's hard to nail it down to one country, but so, I mean, France, Italy, all through Spain, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Central Western Europe, I just fell in love with. Yeah. And so since that trip, that 2 years in Europe, I have been back consistently, nearly every year, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
And obviously building friendships and developing those friendships and connections with the places has been just beautiful.
And so that whole time across Europe, you were in PR mainly as a career, or?
Yes, yeah, in public relations. And then I went back to Australia, continued working in PR. And then in 2015, I had just started a new job in Melbourne. And two of my brothers actually had done a trip to the Philippines with a group, and they had met this amazing foundation in the Philippines. And this particular foundation is run by a Filipino couple, and they go out onto the streets giving out food to the street children. And they also have a program for children where they welcome the children off the streets and invite them in for a Saturday lunch. So at this particular time, this foundation needed extra volunteers. They needed some help. And so I had some time available. So I was in Melbourne and I knew that they needed extra volunteers. And so I went over there for 4 weeks to volunteer at this foundation that cares for street children. And I arrived, and I had never been to the Philippines before, and I was completely devastated by what I saw. I had never experienced anything like that. And just to see the plight of what these street children go through. So in the Philippines, they estimate there's millions of children that are living on the streets throughout the whole country. And these children, once they're living on the streets, they get involved in drugs, alcohol, gangs, child prostitution, trafficking, and it just becomes this vicious, horrendous cycle that they become involved in and addicted to. And these children are on the streets for so many different reasons. Some of them are orphans, so they actually have no families to look after them. Some of them have been abandoned by their own parents and just left on the streets. Other children have actually run away from home because home is actually worse than the streets, because their home is the slums. So these children are on the streets for many different reasons. And when I got there, and I had heard the stats when I was back in Australia, that there's millions of children that are living on the streets in the Philippines. And even though I had heard it as a statistic, I didn't quite comprehend it or nearly believe it.
It's also not one of those places that you necessarily hear about in the news or the media about being, a place where that happens. I guess, you imagine it in maybe other countries, but yeah, it's not, and maybe it's not something that people are massively aware of. No.
And I think we hear probably more about Africa
exactly.
than what's happening with these street children all through Southeast Asia. This is one city, this is Manila, and then obviously throughout the Philippines, but then there's so many other areas through Southeast Asia where it's exactly the same problem, and it's growing. And so you're right, it's not something that I had heard of. And my travel experience I had obviously traveled throughout Europe and also the US and South America, but I had never experienced this. And I had never, even though I had heard the statistic, I didn't realize the scale And once I arrived in Manila and going from the airport to where I was staying to actually see these children walking along the street, dressed actually in rags, dressed hardly in anything, just walking on the streets, just with one goal, and that is to find food so that they could survive that day until tomorrow.
It's unbelievable. And just to take it a step back, so you said that your brothers kind of gave you the insight of it and they told you about it. So what made them go there in the first place?
They wanted to go on a trip. There was this trip going where it was a volunteer trip. So they wanted to go just to be able to volunteer. And it was a 2-week trip. So they went, they came home, they shared, and they had met the founders of this foundation. And I was quite inspired by the founders of this foundation, because to be able to devote your whole life and sacrifice everything to volunteer full time in your own city to look after these children, I thought they're heroes.
And how did you find out about this all the way back in Australia? Again, it's sort of, I'm taking it back to the table in the kitchen. Was this something that was, you guys were discussing, or, how did you get awareness of it?
They had heard about it through, I think it was a friend. And this particular, the couple, they had been out in Australia sharing their story. So it was one of those connections. I think it was one of those serendipitous moments where they met somebody who knew somebody. They went along to a talk and they just said, yes, we'll just go.
Amazing.
And then they come home, they tell us. And then I think it was 2 years later that I went. And it's interesting because I wasn't naturally drawn. As it probably comes across, I'm probably more drawn to Europe. I was probably more like, I think I'd rather go to Paris than Manila. But that really is on a surface. I think my heart was drawing me to go, and I knew they needed some extra help, and I wanted to go my heart was drawing me, and I don't know why, but I just knew that I was meant to go. And so when I arrived, seeing the plight of these children and what they go through, it was completely heartbreaking and totally devastating. And at the same time, meeting these children and hearing their stories of how they've overcome what they've overcome and their resilience was so beautiful. So it was this 4 weeks that was actually so challenging and so hard and so devastating, and also on a personal level, very devastating. So heartbreaking to see what they go through, but also challenging for me, because it was a different type of country. It wasn't my usual travel situation. But at the same time, it was so beautiful to see these children and hear their stories, and to see how suffering and joy can coexist, and to see how they live joy in the depths of absolute destitution was quite extraordinary. Because I think it's quite cliche. We often hear how happy, people come back from these countries and go, oh, the children are so happy. And it can be quite cliche because we hear it all the time, but it is so true. And so it really showed me how joy and suffering coexist through the stories of these children. And I think for me, as I shared earlier, I'm very much drawn by beauty. There's the 3 transcendentals of truth, beauty, and goodness. And there's something about beauty that's transcendental, that draws me. I'm like, wow, and for me, that was always Europe. That was the architecture, it was the interiors, it was the food, the people, the way of life, the way of living. But then going to the Philippines, on a surface level, the aesthetic beauty isn't there. I didn't see aesthetic beauty at all. It's the slums. It's not beautiful. Yet I saw beauty in a different way. I saw the beauty of these children, of their souls. And I think for me, that's when I really saw we can, like, the beauty of the soul is so much more beautiful than the most glorious sunset. We can go into nature and see the most beautiful sunset, but actually the beauty of a human soul is so much more beautiful than the most beautiful building in Europe or the most beautiful sunset. And I think that's what I saw in these children, that there was no, aesthetically, there was no beautiful beauty around them, but hearing their hearts and hearing their stories and hearing what they actually really thought inside and what they overcame, and their stories of forgiveness and their stories of hope. I was like, wow, that's true beauty. That is the beauty of the soul right there.
How old were the kids? I mean, you said there are millions of children on the streets. What ages are we talking?
They ran from babies to 18. I remember the first few days in, I was with a few people and we were walking down the street, and there was a 2-year-old living on the street and being looked after by his older sister, and his older sister was 8. And I asked where their parents were, and their parents had died. And so this little 8-year-old girl was looking after her 2-year-old brother. And this 2-year-old boy was walking and he was wheeling a tiny little cabin suitcase bag around, and it was empty, and he was wheeling it. And she told me that was his bed. That's what he sleeps in. He sleeps in this little suitcase. And the saddest thing is that is normal. There's 2-year-olds that are just living on the street, on the concrete footpath, just on the side of the footpath. And so to see this was quite unbelievable. And even when there was another girl who was looking after her little sister, and her little sister would have been 1, and they were sitting in a little back of a tuk-tuk, and the little 1-year-old was drinking out of a baby bottle, but it was meant to be milk, but it was completely brown. And so I asked the older girl what was in the bottle, and she said it's a little bit of milk mixed in with the river water and coffee. And we were told that that's what a lot of the children, the toddlers and babies on the street drink, is coffee, because it's a stimulant and it fills them up and it keeps them going because they can't afford milk. And so a lot of the street children have no teeth, or their teeth are rotted because they've been brought up on coffee, because that's the only thing that they can get and afford that is enough sustenance for them to keep going. So these children, they're in total survival mode day in, day out, just trying to look for food to survive that day. So to see that, it was unbelievable.
And it sounds like it was almost the second you arrived, you witnessed this straight away.
When the plane landed, you can actually see the shanty towns just built up right to the barbed wire fence on the tarmac. These houses that are just built with cardboard boxes and tin roofs. And as we were driving, we could just see the children on the streets begging, and it's like, oh my gosh, it is real. This is not a statistic. It was confronting to see that, to see what these children go through. And I think probably one of the saddest things I saw was a lot of these children are on drugs, and I thought it was because they're involved in crime, but it's a solvent that they sniff, a glue that they sniff, and it's actually, they sniff it to numb their stomachs from hunger. And it's cheaper for them to buy this glue, this solvent, than it is to buy a bowl of rice. And then they sniff it numbs their hunger pangs, and then they become addicted to it. And then once they become addicted to it, it obviously causes all these other issues. And to see these children sniffing this glue day in, day out just to numb their stomachs from hunger. I was like, how can this be? This is a 10-hour flight from Melbourne. And these children don't have access to food. And it goes into so many other, why is the government allowing this? And then that just is a whole nother complex issue. But I think what is amazing to see is that there are amazing grassroots organizations run by local Filipino volunteers who are doing amazing things for these children. And it's hard to think about the numbers because there are millions, and there's only so many grassroots organizations that are able to look after these children. But it takes me back. I might just go back to a moment that I had the year prior before I went to Manila on that trip. And it was May 2014, so exactly 10 years ago to this month. And I was in London and I was at this leadership conference, and there was a lady on stage and she was talking about the 143 million orphans around the world. And it just stopped me in my tracks because I thought 143 million orphans. Firstly, I had no idea there were 143 million orphans around the world. And she was talking about them, and she just said one line. It was just one question she put to the audience. And it was just this one line that just got me. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And she just said, how will they know that they're loved? And I just sat there, and there was something about those words, how will they know that they're loved, that really struck my heart. And I got teary as I thought about that, because I thought, how will they know that they're loved? And that was such a central part to my learning, growing up, my childhood. Like, love was the center of everything. I was so loved. I knew I was loved. I never doubted it. It was central to everything. And to think about 143 million children out there, how will they know that they're loved? And I was so struck that it brought me to tears, but it was so overwhelming that I actually couldn't think about it, because what can we do about that?
Where do you start? Yeah.
Where do you start? It's 143 million. That's the population of Australia is 20 million. Where do you even start with that? And so it was so overwhelming that it was one of those questions that went into my subconscious and into my heart, and then I just couldn't think about it because it was too overwhelming. And then it was exactly 1 year to the month in May 2015 that I found myself in Manila volunteering at this foundation that cares for street children.
I know you went because your brothers had experienced it. Do you think that being at that conference and hearing those words was the icing on the cake to make you go over there, do you think? Or
do you know, at the time, I didn't put it together. It was only a few years later that when I looked back and I saw those little golden threads, that I thought, that was part of the journey to get there. And I think that often happens in life, that it's not necessarily in lights, this is meant to be and this led to this, but it was all those little golden threads that I was like, I think it was one of those things that just went into my heart and mind subconsciously, that was just this leading light to go there. And I think, so in a way, yes. Yeah. Unintentionally. Yeah. Because it was a trip that wasn't, I'm a dreamer. I'm a planner, I'm a dreamer. I have so many ideas and plans. And that was not on my list. Yeah,
brilliant. I wondered how, obviously, I mean, that's the picture you've painted in the Philippines is horrendous. Those poor kids. How were they when you got there, interacting with them? Because did you have a translator there? How were they to foreign people being there? Were they intrigued, or did they just oblivious to it? How was the interaction with them?
Yes, they were so excited. They were so joyful. I mean, I suppose there was different interactions at different levels. But they were very drawn, and it was exciting. And I mean, I think the children just generally on the streets, they see foreigners and they come begging. So there's that side of it. But then the children that we were working with in this foundation, they were just absolutely delighted, and we just delighted in them, and it was just, they were so beautiful. So actually what happens is at this foundation every Saturday, they open up their doors and provide food for 500 street children, and they've been doing this for 25 years now. Wow. Every Saturday. And to this day, every Saturday, wherever I am, I always think on a Saturday, wow, those volunteers, they're still going. They are opening their doors, they're welcoming 500 children in and feeding them. And so I was there to basically help with this feeding program. And I thought that it would be like a soup kitchen where all the children would stand in a line with their bowls, and they would get served rice out of these big pots in a line, and they would be served. They would find a little place on the concrete, sit down, eat their rice, and then go off. But no, what they actually do is so beautiful. So all the children, they come in the morning, they play games with them, and they just let the children be children. And then all the children go outside and they transform this room, which is quite simple. It's just a concrete floor and tin roof. They transform this room into a dining room. So they set up trestle tables, they put tablecloths down. Sometimes they put flowers as centerpieces or banana leaves to make it look beautiful. And they set up every place individually for each child with cutlery and a cup and sometimes napkins. And I was amazed. I just thought this was so beautiful that they were setting the table so lovely for these children to have their lunch. And so the volunteers were setting it up, and we had 20 minutes to set up the 500 places. So I was helping, and I was putting down the spoons, the 500 spoons for each of the places. And as I was putting the spoons down, I got one spoon and I put one of the spoons down and it was slightly crooked. This is 1 out of 500. And one of the volunteers, one of the long-term volunteers came over and he straightened it. And I thought, oh, he's got OCD. And he looked at me and he said, we want to treat these children like little kings and queens. And I was like, wow, that's so lovely, because if the Queen or King of England walked through here, we would be polishing that cutlery. Yeah. We would make sure everything is completely straight. And these children are little kings and queens, and they deserve to be treated with the exact same dignity and respect. Yeah. And so just to see the amount of effort and detail in every element. And then I went out to the kitchen to help with the food preparation, thinking it would be these big pots of rice and the children would be in their lines being served. But what they actually do is they plate up every meal individually like a work of art. So there's the cook, the head chef, is at the front of this Congo line. And it's a simple meal. It was chicken, eggs, rice and chips. But he designed the first plate. So he was placing the egg and the rice and the chips in a really lovely way, like a work of art. And then everybody in this Congo line would copy and plate up the 500 plates like a work of art. So beautiful. And so I was in charge of putting the tomato sauce on the egg, on the 500 eggs. So I just got the tomato sauce and I just squeezed the bottle and put the tomato sauce on the egg. And he comes over, he's like, no, don't do it like that. Oh, no. He was offended. He said, no, do it in a heart shape because we want these children to feel loved. And for me, it was in that moment where it was this full circle moment where I thought about those words 1 year prior to that lady when she said, how will they know that they're loved? And here I am doing, it's the most trivial, smallest, tiniest thing of putting tomato sauce in a heart shape on top of an egg. And it reminded me, one of my favorite quotes is, to do small things with great love is a great thing. And I thought, it's such a small thing, tomato sauce in a heart shape for these children. But in that moment, I thought that is to show them that they're loved in the smallest thing, in just a moment in time out of their whole life. It was just a moment in time. But every detail was planned and designed in that lunch to show the children that they're loved. And those children were coming for their meal, for their food, their one meal on a plate all week to eat. But all the other elements that surrounded that meal was to show them that they're loved, to show them their dignity, to show them that they are little kings and queens, and to give them an experience in that moment that they're loved. And so I think for me, it was a big lesson and moment of, it's easy to look at the 143 million and to be so overwhelmed and to shut down and to close off, which I did, to think it's too overwhelming, it's too much. But in that moment, 1 year later, to see those children individually and think, it's to help one, that's enough. Of course, we want to do more and more, but if we are so overwhelmed by the 143 million, it's easy not to even help one. And to see this foundation that's helping one and then one more, that suddenly it becomes 500 plates every Saturday, and not just 500 plates, but 500 plates of love that shows them above and beyond that they are loved, was so important. And that it isn't the big things, that because those children, I mean, they need everything. Where do you even start? So it's just a small thing in the scheme of everything they need. But that's where things grow, those small little moments.
Amazing. And where do you think that ethos and culture and sort of mindset had come from, the people who were running it? Because it sounds like there's people who are being very intentional about how they're managing that whole process.
Yes, it all comes from love for them, their generosity of heart and love to be able to give to these children. And I think that's the amazing thing about the human soul, is that the capacity that we have to love and to give, and that generosity of spirit, when we open our hearts to humanity, when we open our hearts to the other and see people for who they truly are, there is no bounds when it comes to love. So when I look at these volunteers who have given up their whole life to serve these children, it's just coming from their hearts of absolute pure love that is just, there is no bounds, that they just give and give. And so I think often we put limitations on how much we can give or how much we can love, but seeing them in action and seeing their love for those children, of how much they deserve, shows how much, I think, those people, how much they see in order to action it.
It's such a beautiful story and an absolutely incredible foundation, the way you painted that picture. They've been doing that for so long, and it's not just the feeding the children, it's the whole, not theatre, but it's the whole experience around it as well, which, you know, when those of us are lucky enough to eat out in restaurants, and nice restaurants sometimes, you know, you get that whole experience. So to apply that to the kids that have nothing is beautiful.
Yeah,
I think it's so important, because we could be like, oh, just give them food, but they deserve so much more than that. And that was a huge thing for me when I saw these children. We went out and we served them, and we served them and presented them their plate of food. And when they came in and they sat down to this beautifully set table with their food on a plate, these children, suddenly they sat up a little bit straighter. They had smiles in their face, and there was suddenly this quietness in the room as they ate, and you could see the way they sat up and the way they smiled. They felt loved.
Yeah.
And for me, that's when I realized, I was like, this is the only meal they get served on a plate all week, because the rest of the week they're looking for food out of bins from the gutter, leftovers, food out of plastic, wherever they can find bits of food. But this food served on a plate, it's the plate that actually gives them dignity. And I never realized how important a plate is. And so that was a moment for me when I just saw, wow, this is, as you said, that it's just not the food, it's the whole experience around it that is important. And I think that gets lost because people think, oh, they just need food, just give them food and move on to the next thing. But they actually, it's the experience around it that might seem superficial, the table set, the food decorated in a particularly artistic way on the plate, but it's all of those things that actually show the child how much we love them, how much we respect them, and it gives them that dignity.
Incredible.
That it's just not giving them the food. And in fact, as I was there and we were serving the food, there was this boy in the corner, and he would have been about 19 years of age and years old. And he was standing there and he had this suit on, which was 3 times too big for him. And he had this big backpack on and he looked quite shy and he was sort of just standing there looking. And I thought, oh, I wonder if he's one of the volunteers. So I went over and I introduced myself and asked him if he was one of the volunteers. And he said, no. He goes, I've actually come here today because I used to come here every single Saturday during my childhood. I used to be one of those children. I grew up on the streets and I would come here for my one meal of the week each Saturday. And today I've come back to say thank you because now I'm at university, I'm studying engineering, and those Saturdays were the most joyful days of my life. And I was like, wow, just to see one of these children, to see him grow up to an 18, 19-year-old going to university, and how he had come back with just such a heart full of gratitude for that one meal on a plate, showed me it just wasn't the meal on the plate. It was so much more than that.
And I guess what this does for these kids is it gives them an idea or a glimpse of what life can be. You know, it gives them that sort of insight into actually this is what it's like to have, I guess, some value in your life and a perception of what it can be.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And to think and dream a little bit, because I mean that's definitely something that I think is so important that we take for granted. It's quite easy for us to dream and think about the future. And in fact, it's much harder for us to live in the present moment. We're always in the future.
Yeah.
For these children, they are so in the present because they're in survival mode. It's hard for them to even think about tomorrow, let alone the future. So you're right, it does. It makes them think about what could be possible.
And so what was going through so you said you were there for an initial 4 weeks. So what was kind of going through your mind at this point? Because I'm just trying to sort of, as you're talking, sit there and think, how would I react to seeing something like that? Because I'll be honest with you, I've never seen deprivation on that scale. I haven't been to Asia much, I haven't been to Africa, but certainly not poorer parts. And so I guess from the second you landed and you saw some of the scenes, and then obviously having the experience with, you know, in this environment, there must have been a lot of processing going on.
Yes, yeah, there was. There was. And I'd had a little taste. I'd been to India and Peru, in the shanty towns in Peru, so I had a bit of a taste of it, but not like this, not to see thousands of children just on the streets, or to be to be there for 4 weeks. And 4 weeks, it was a long time. So I was processing a lot. And there was many times where I was like, I just want to leave. It's just so much. Yet at the same time, just being constant, there was that constant tension of like, I think I'm going to get in a taxi and go to the airport right now. To the point of just being so unbelievably inspired by these children. So that feeding program, these children going for their 1 meal of the week, I mean, you won't believe this. I couldn't believe it, but so many of those children, they would bring plastic bags with them and put some of the food in a plastic bag to save, to give to other children on the streets that weren't at that feeding program. And to see these children do that, to go back out and share what they had, the little that they had, to go and share that with the other children and their friends on the streets who missed out. So there was so much that I was seeing that was so hard and challenging, but so much that I was seeing that I was like, wow, these children, these are 5-year-olds who are sharing their lunch and taking it out back to the other children. These children, these are the inspirational children.
But also, they're not learning that from anywhere, are they? It's just sort of, it's innate in them to do that.
Yes. I mean, that's amazing. Nobody ever told them. It's true. And I mean, I didn't see, there would definitely be children out there who have learnt horrible things and have probably perpetuated that as well. So I don't want to be in a bubble either, but I didn't see that, but I know that would exist as well. So there's both sides of it, but to see those children who have lived hell on earth and have experienced and seen the worst, yet they actually are living their best and doing these amazing acts of love is incredible. But there is definitely the other side. So I was there and there was so much I was thinking through, so much I was processing. And whilst I was there, I started thinking to our food culture in Australia, how we love going out for breakfast and lunch and dinner and brunch and drinks, and we are living in this golden age of the foodie and how much we love food. And I was thinking about that a lot while I was there and seeing these two different worlds. And I was thinking we shouldn't feel guilty about that because it's actually a beautiful part of our culture. I think our hospitality industry, our love for food and what we've created is so important because it builds friendships, it builds relationships, it's part of the fabric of our culture, it's part of the fabric of our communities, and it's something that we should be grateful for and have gratitude for rather than rejecting or feeling guilty about that. And so I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we could partner with our hospitality industry and elevate it for impact to make a difference rather than rejecting it or feeling guilty about it? Because I do think a lot of people can see these situations and they can go to these developing countries and come back and obviously come back heartbroken as I was, but people can come back and they can either go down two paths, either feel so guilty about it, which can lead to a spiral of either judging everybody else and being inwardly depressed and feeling quite resentful for what we have, and or just becoming quite bitter and resentful and judging everybody else. And I just feel like neither work. And I thought, I don't want to even enter into that. I don't want to even have a bar of that because it actually doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the people around us. It doesn't help the children. It just becomes this negative spiral and we just take ourselves out of what we have, the gratitude and the blessings that we've received. And it just perpetuates actually other problems. And so I was thinking to our beautiful, beautiful hospitality industry in Australia and here in the UK. And I thought, imagine if we could partner with it, elevate it for impact to make a difference. And I was thinking to what I had seen in the Philippines, and and the agriculture. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be amazing if we could teach the children how to actually grow their own food, and that food actually can be grown. It doesn't come out of plastic. It doesn't come out of bins. Food can actually grow from a seed. And so whilst I was there, I was speaking to this foundation that I was volunteering at, and they actually, on their roof, they had a concrete slab and nothing on it. And I said, oh, you could do a rooftop garden and grow some herbs, micro herbs, and a little kitchen garden. And they said, that is our dream. We have always wanted to do that. And I was like, oh, that would be fantastic. And they said, what's stopping us is the money, because it does cost to create a proper rooftop garden with all of the irrigation and everything. I said, well, I could go back to Australia and raise the money and send it back. And they said, thank you, we would love that. So I went back to Australia, asked family and friends, raised $5,000, sent it back to Manila. They created this beautiful, lush rooftop garden that was so lovely and is so beautiful, and 9 years on is still flourishing. And I thought, oh, this is great, because it wasn't just food for the children. And although it was a rooftop garden, so it didn't provide a lot of vegetables for the 500 children, but it was providing the herbs and garnishings. And I thought, that's great. But what I didn't realize were all the spin-offs from this rooftop garden that I hadn't anticipated, and neither did the foundation. So what it became was quite therapeutic for the children. So these children, they would go up, they would be in the garden, and they would have different responsibilities. So some of the children were in charge of cutting, weeding, planting, watering, and they started taking on responsibilities. And this rooftop garden ended up becoming this school of lessons on leadership, on responsibility, on patience, that it takes time for a seed to grow into a tomato. And the children learnt that food can be grown, that you can grow basil from a few seeds, to the point that some of these children, every time they were eating fruits, they would keep all the seeds. And when they were on the streets, they would find patches of grass and start planting the seeds in the grass. And it became not only an activity and a hobby, but a bit of a game for them as well. So it started teaching them all these lessons, and then it became something that was quite therapeutic. So a lot of these children who have gone through trauma, being in a garden can teach them so many lessons, but also can be quite healing for them. And so seeing this rooftop garden flourish, not just with the food that it was providing, but also the lessons that it was teaching the children, and also the therapeutic benefits, I started thinking that these to be able to fund sustainable farms and rooftop gardens would be so beneficial for these children, rather than just handing out food. So I was back in Australia. I started thinking about our beautiful hospitality industry, thinking how can we partner with this hospitality industry to elevate it for impact, to make a difference, and to connect the two. And so that's really how OnePlate was born. So basically, we would partner with restaurants and cafes. They would choose one menu item, and each time that menu item is ordered, $1 would be donated to OnePlate, and 100% of that dollar would fund our projects in the Philippines. So we did the first rooftop garden and then a farm. So we were raising money for this through the restaurants and cafes in Australia. And what was really beautiful about that was for Australians who would go into these cafes, they would order their eggs Benedict, $1 would go to OnePlate. That person, they would feel like they could make a small difference, a small impact by going out for breakfast that morning. And it became this bridge where, because at OnePlate, our whole motto is hope, not guilt. It's to be hopeful and to be grateful for the food culture that we have and the hospitality industry we have, not to feel guilty about it, to be grateful for it and to make a difference. And so it became this, I suppose it's become a movement where enjoying and celebrating our rich food culture and making a difference through funding these sustainable food projects, which really became this bridge, and people were loving it, are loving it. And these farms and rooftop gardens became more than food. It was teaching the children, it is teaching the children how to grow their own food. And it's teaching them all these life lessons. And it's so therapeutic for them on so many different levels. And one of the ways I can share a little story about one of the children is that one of the boys at the time, he was 12 years of age, and he started going up to the rooftop garden, and he had been living on the streets since he was 2. His mother died, his father was in jail for drugs, and his auntie couldn't care for him, so he was just left to fend for himself on the street. And while he was on the street, he got involved in gangs and got involved in terrible crime. And when he was 12, one of the other children told him about this feeding program that on Saturdays you can go and get lunch at this place. So he started going every Saturday to get lunch. And during that time, this foundation gave him a scholarship for accommodation and a school. So he started going to school, and he had a lot of anger management issues, anger problems, obviously through the trauma that he'd gone through. But he was really drawn to going up to this rooftop garden every day. And so he was in charge of watering and weeding the herb gardens. So every day he would go up there, and he started talking to the plants. He started patting the plants, and it became quite therapeutic for him. He was angry at adults everywhere, and he couldn't connect at all because of what he'd gone through. But in this rooftop garden where he was surrounded by nature, by creation, by living plants, it was a safe space for him, and it became a part of his healing journey. And after a couple of years, he's the most mellow, peaceful person you would ever meet. I think he's about 18 now. Anyhow, he told us that his dream is to be a farmer. And for us, that might seem quite simple for an 18-year-old boy to say, I want to be a farmer. But for him, this is so huge because firstly, he has a dream. He's actually thinking about the future, which is huge. He's not just thinking about getting through today. And secondly, for him to actually connect with the land, to connect with plants, to be able to lead to that dream, to be a farmer, it's a big deal for these children.
It's giving him a mission, right? It's giving him a purpose, and which it gives him something outside of himself to think about. Okay, the trauma's happened, but actually I have a vision outside of myself that I can focus on.
Yes, yeah, exactly, which he wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I think seeing the benefits of these gardens beyond just food to eat, it's the whole experience of it, like the table setting, the whole experience, it takes them to another level to think beyond today, beyond the present, which is, as I said before, is so different from us. We are trying to live the present. We're trying to put so many things in place to live in the present moment here and now. Whereas for those children, to dream about the future is so key and important for their development to move forward in life. So, yeah, to witness and to see those farms and rooftop gardens flourish was so key. So being back in Australia and raising that first $5,000 was really the beginning of OnePlate. And then I asked a few friends to come on board as co-founders friends who have skills that I don't have. And together we started working on the business side of OnePlate and building the foundations. And we had the OnePlate launch party in 2017. So 2015 was when I had the idea for OnePlate in Manila and did the first rooftop garden. And we really built it over 2016, and then 2017 we launched it and started getting restaurants and cafes on board for that $1 a menu item.
So exciting. Were you working at the time? Did you have to give up your job, or did you do it on the side, or how was the career looking at that point?
That is such a good question, because I was working 2 days a week, and then I ended up doing OnePlate full-time volunteer. So I was a little, this is the crazy bit, the part that I don't even understand why I did it. So yeah, I basically did it full-time. We're all volunteers, so nobody at OnePlate gets paid a wage. So I basically used up all my savings.
Right.
And to really grow and to build OnePlate.
So the savings that you had been saving for travelling.
I know. Yeah, that's right, for travelling. And these are the unexpected things in life, because I was saying before to Pete that I'm such a dreamer. I have so many thoughts and ideas, and I had so many ideas of different things that I wanted to do. My background's in PR, but I'm so interested in interior design and fashion, and I had an idea of doing my own perfume brand, and these were the things that I'm definitely more creative and visionary. So these were the things that I was thinking and creating and visualizing in my mind. And then I had that trip to Manila, and it took a little bit of a different turn, and suddenly I was using all my savings and doing this full-time, creating and building a charity, OnePlate, which starting a charity was never on my dream list. Going to the Philippines was never on my dream list.
And sorry, just on that, I'm kind of fascinated on that process, because obviously, so you went there as a volunteer for this existing charity, and then when you were there, I'm guessing you got involved with some of the people who ran it, or some of the people behind the organisation, to then suggest things like the roof garden, and then I guess it sprang from there. Or how did that work? Just because also, what I would love out of this, if people thought, actually, wow, this is achievable for me. I can be in a situation and figure out how to make a difference.
Yes, yeah. It was, so when I look at the journey now, it's obviously come a long way. But back then it was, I think, starting with small steps. If I had have seen the full picture and how big it's grown and where it's gone, I would have overwhelmed myself back then. So I think back then, just thinking $5,000 for one rooftop garden is so achievable. But then I think this underlying desire to be able to really celebrate our hospitality industry and to be able to do these farms and rooftop gardens, all driven out of the one core passion and vision, which is to nourish and nurture these children, to love these children. And at the heart of it all, it goes back to those words, to show these children that they're loved, was key. So I think knowing what that vision is, and knowing what my core purpose, core mission, core vision of to show these children that they're loved, it was the main driving factor. So it started off with that one rooftop garden, and to be able to see what's possible. So to see a concrete slab and think, oh, a rooftop garden, and to be able to partner. So I'm all about partnerships and collaborations and doing it together. We can't work in silos. It's so much harder to grow businesses, to grow things. I think we're called to collaborate. We're called to do it together. And so to be able to partner with that foundation, and we're OnePlate, I'm not a farmer. I'm not an expert. I really do struggle to keep some of my herbs alive on my balcony. So I cannot claim. So these partners that we partner with, they're the experts. They know how to farm. They know how to do the gardens. We're just there to walk alongside them in encouragement. And if they want to do it, we want to help them to be able to do it. So if that foundation said, no, we have no desire to do that, then we wouldn't have done it, because it relies on the locals wanting to do it, their passion, and walking beside them to help empower them to be able to do that.
You mentioned about the creativity within you, as in starting an interior design business or perfume, but it seems to me your creative ideas for the foundation with the rooftop terrace, and then putting in people with different skill sets and seeing that link between the Australian hospitality industry and how that could impact back in the Philippines is very creative anyway, isn't it? And the second follow-up question I have is, you've mentioned a few times how profound an impact that Show the Children That They Loved lady mentioned at the conference. Have you ever spoken to her since and explained how profound an impact that had on you, or not?
No, I haven't been able to track her down.
Really?
But I love that you asked that question, because I would love to. I will. I know somebody who knows her. I would love to email her and tell her that, because I think it's such an important lesson if we just don't know how powerful our words are, and how one sentence can change the course of someone else's life. And that one sentence from a lady, of how that can impact how it was part of the story of starting a charity. It's quite amazing.
It really is. And we were talking a little bit earlier on, weren't we, about when you look back at your life and the things that happen along the way that you can plot back and think, well, if that hadn't happened, if you hadn't gone to that conference, or you're busy, it might have altered your path a little bit. So it's really interesting when you look back and what impact it's had. It's
the golden threads of life that at the time we don't realise. It's only in retrospect, looking back, that it all links. And that's what I love. And for me, that's what I love about this journey with OnePlate. I didn't write a business plan at the beginning of it. And if I had have, a lot of people told me you need to write a 10-year business plan. And if I had have written that 10-year business plan back then, I can 100% say we wouldn't have stayed on course with that business plan, because it was developed and created as we went. And that was the exciting part of it. And I think this probably goes back to your question, Adam, of what would we say to people who are looking to start something? I think the key thing is actually just start. Because you may not know the 1 year plan. You may have no money to start with. You may not even really know what the full idea is. You've just got a little glimpse. But just starting is the absolute key, because obviously it would never happen if you don't start it. But the big lesson that I've learned is if we wait for everything to be in order, for all the ducks to be in line, it actually never will be. And then it's our own perfectionism that gets in the way. And my whole mantra has always, through this process, has been progress over perfection.
Absolutely. I actually said it yesterday to someone. It's and sorry to interrupt, but it's so key, because the brain can find so many reasons to not do something. Even in the building we're sat in, right? We do an Airbnb every now and again, and my wife was like, we can't do it for this reason. We can't. It's like, let's just start. Let's just see what happens. And we'll figure it out. We'll iterate, and it's progress, not perfection. And I think it's such a good point, because it's not just from doing good causes, but I think also for people to be able to help themselves I've said it to you a lot of times, right? Even like with this podcast, it is such an important thing, but especially when it's about really important causes, it's just do something and start and iterate and learn and evolve.
Yes, because often we think starting, we're like, oh, but it's too small what we've started, or that's only just one little step. It's just one email I sent to somebody on the other side of the world to start whatever that idea is. But that's a big thing because you've started and it begins this whole new way. And I think we do, I can say, like, I think I'm a bit of a recovering perfectionist, and I've really had to get over it because the website doesn't need to be perfect. If there's spelling errors, if it's not the right perfect Pantone color, it's okay, just launch it and get it out there. Especially creating this cookbook, like, I can be a little bit like, I'm very detail orientated and I'm like, no, just start, get it out there. And it may not necessarily look or be the way that we'd envisaged, or it may not actually end up being what we had envisaged at the beginning. And that's okay. It's really getting in the arena and having a go. Because I remember someone once giving an analogy of a tennis match, and I just imagined the courts, and she said you can either be a spectator in the arena and watch match after match, or you can just be on the arena and play the game and pick up that racket. And it's just picking up the racket, and it's just hitting the ball, and you might miss the ball 1,000 times, but you've got the racket in your hand and you're standing on the arena having a go, just not watching as a spectator going, should I go and play? Should I have a go? Or whatever it might be. So I think starting is just starting, and I can definitely be a testament to say I did not have the skill. I didn't know how to start a charity. I had no experience. I hadn't done a course in how to start a charity. I don't know much about farming or gardening. I had never done a cookbook. All these things I had no idea about. But you just learn. I just learned as I went.
Well, I think also when you have such an important mission to focus on, and I think this is where a lot of businesses fail, and I think this about my own business, but also I look at other businesses and people's projects, is sometimes you don't have that overarching mission or goal, like you said, almost like that future planning thing. But it's when I suppose I'm trying to process this myself as you're talking, but it's when you've got such an important mission as the overarching goal, which is effectively feeding kids and making them feel loved, almost you just naturally, everything else just becomes not insignificant, but it's like, yeah, of course we can figure that out. We can figure that out. Whereas I guess sometimes if it's just a normal business, everything is about revenue or commercial matters. And so sort of maybe it becomes a bigger problem. I don't know. But I guess when you're actually chasing something so important and fundamental, actually it's like you kind of probably look at it and prioritize in a different way. I don't know if that's a very good point I'm making, but it just makes me reflect on, how you run anything. And actually, but when you're doing something so important and meaningful, actually it's like, well, yeah, that thing which in a normal business might be super complex to work out, of course we can do it because we have to.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. And being so aligned with what our purpose and mission is in life is that guiding light. And it becomes, and as things grow and things go on and you take bigger risks, suddenly what was a big risk suddenly isn't a big risk anymore, because it's nearly like sharpening a sword. Like it's easier as you go, because of the risks that we may have taken in the past that seemed huge but not as big now. And it's that momentum. Momentum does build momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I guess it's just small steps, and small steps build, and each step you take, then you have another kind of step on the journey.
Yes, and different parts. And that's the thing that I've always tried with OnePlate, is to be focused and completely aligned with the vision. So the mission and the heart is so strong and unshakable that heart to nourish and enrich the lives of children in great need and to show them that they're loved. Like, that is the mission, purpose, unshakable. That's the heart of it. But outside of that, to also hold OnePlate loosely and in a surrendered position to be open to the opportunities that may come in and flow out and what might happen, because our original business model was partnering with restaurants and cafes. They choose that menu item, and each time that menu item is ordered, $1 is donated to OnePlate. And then that's what I thought OnePlate would be for the next 20 years. But then the idea of the cookbook came about, and that was never part of any plan, and it wouldn't have been in that 10-year business plan. But to be open and holding it loose enough to go, oh, that's great, let's go down that way and see what opportunities open. And that's really how OnePlate has, I think, really grown, is allowing those opportunities also to shape and to come in and to partner and to collaborate for it to grow.
And this beautiful cookbook that you brought with you today, which mine is on order, is just beautiful, isn't it? So you over in London for a month or so at the moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've brought this beautiful cookbook. I mean, we'll post a link up on the we'll post it on our show link so you can see it. But it's a beautiful, beautiful book. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of interspersed with recipes. It's got a history on OnePlate, but also some of the amazing projects that you've been working on as well. I mean, yeah.
And it's hard to explain on a podcast, but it really is a piece of art. I mean, I don't know how to explain it. It is fantastic.
You must be so proud of this.
Yes, it's worked out so well. And just for the listeners, so you understand the story of the cookbook, this is the second cookbook.
Is it?
So the first cookbook was Brunch in Melbourne.
Ah, okay.
So in 2019, I was in Africa, in Kenya, looking at some of our projects. And on the plane back, I started thinking about how we could partner more with the hospitality industry to raise more money to fund projects. And this idea of the cookbook came about, and I was thinking to Melbourne. So I think Melbourne is really the home of brunch. Melburnians love brunch. I sort of feel like Melbourne brought brunch to the world. It's such a thing in Melbourne. I mean, brunch in Australia is such a thing, as you would have
absolutely
seen when you were in Australia.
That was Rick Stein.
Yeah.
We may have the other day.
Yeah, I sent you the picture.
Yes, you sent me the picture. Yeah. So
Heston went to school just the next village.
Did he?
Yeah. That's so funny. Yeah, so Melbourne brunch was a big...
Yeah, so brunch is such a thing. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be incredible if we could do a cookbook called Brunch in Melbourne and partner with 100 of Melbourne's best restaurants and cafes? They give us their favourite brunch recipe. We create a cookbook called Brunch in Melbourne and sell it, and 100% of the profit of the cookbook would fund our projects. So I came back to Australia, started reaching out to restaurants and cafes. They gave me their favourite brunch recipe, their prized golden recipe. And together with our amazing food photographer, Georgia Gold, and our food stylist, Meryl, we created this cookbook called Brunch in Melbourne. And so the first print run was 2,000 books, and it was sent to print in February 2020, and I had a big launch party ready to go in May 2020. Obviously had no idea what was about to happen. The books went to print, and then they arrived in the warehouse in May 2020. And 2,000 books on a spreadsheet doesn't seem like a lot. But then when I saw 2,000 books in the warehouse, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a lot of books to sell. But it turned out that selling cookbooks in 2020 was the best thing we could have done. Everybody was at home and cooking and looking for the next cookbook. And it went really well. So we sold out within 6 weeks.
Wow.
And we did a second print run and a third print run, and it ended up becoming a bestseller. And because of that cookbook, we now have 33 projects across the Philippines, Cambodia, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And all of our projects are either farms, rooftop gardens, avocado projects, bee projects, all for children who are been living on the street, children who have been abandoned, children who are in great need. And that is really from the sale of these cookbooks. And so the cookbook became a bestseller, and 2 years went by. And in 2022, I started thinking, I think we could do another cookbook. It's going well. And I thought, I wonder what brunch in London would be like. So I came over to London, started dabbling in the food scene over here, quickly realised that I think London probably has one of the best food scenes in the entire world. And I thought, I think brunch here would be so interesting, because brunch, I think, in London leans a bit more on the side of lunch, whereas brunch in Melbourne is a bit more on the side of breakfast.
I'm a big brunch fan. I was sending pictures of you the other day from Tame, which is a town just up the road, and they had this incredible food market. But there's a place called Black Goo that do unbelievable brunch. But I think you're right. It's more, for me, brunch is like 11 o'clock, and you would kind of do it as a way of almost like, I'm going to have brunch and I'm going to go big on it, and then I'm going to have like an earlier dinner. It's quite strategic.
Yes, it's so true.
I'm just thumbing through some of these recipes as you're talking, Thérèse. Honestly, I don't know if you can hear my stomach, whether it's audible on the mic, but it's gurgling away because I'm looking at these recipes. Angela Hartnett's egg fried in sage and chili butter. I mean, look at that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one, but yeah.
So delicious.
So you came to London and thought, right, you started dabbling in the food scene, thinking, right, I think there's definitely potential here for a brunch cookbook.
Yeah, so I started reaching out to a few contacts here. By this time, Georgia Gold, who photographed Melbourne, she had moved back to London, and she said, yeah, I'm on board. I met Emily Ezekiel, who is our food stylist, and she came on board. We started reaching out to restaurants and cafes, and I was absolutely amazed at how the London hospitality industry just opened its arms to OnePlate, embraced it, and said yes. So we started getting some incredible restaurants and cafes on board, submitting their prized brunch recipes, and chefs. So I basically, in 2022, 2023, we started signing up restaurants and chefs. So we had everyone from the Ritz to Claridge's to the Dorchester to St. John's to Honey & Co. to Popham's Bakery, E5 Bakehouse, all saying yes, submitting their recipes. And then amazing chefs from Angela Harnett to Jamie Oliver and Heston and Ella Mills, from Deliciously Ella to Ottolenghi, Diana Henry, Claire Patak, some amazing chefs, restaurants and cafes who all saw the vision of OnePlate to fund these sustainable food projects, and all saw and really embraced our mission of celebrating the food industry, celebrating our beautiful creative hospitality industry and elevating it for impact to make a difference. So they submitted their recipes. We shot the whole cookbook in a beautiful food studio in Hackney, Anna Jones's food studio, Narroway. And we had a chef there who cooked it all. Georgia Gold photographed it. Emily Ezekiel styled it in such a beautiful way. And together we created and crafted this cookbook. And we launched it 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so
I feel
it's
very,
hot
very lucky.
off the press.
Yeah, very privileged to have a copy here. It really is a very amazing. I mean, it's like a cookbook, but it's the sort of thing you could have on a coffee table, as a.
Looks like a design book as well, doesn't it?
It does.
It's just so well done.
I think it goes back to also something that we really value, and that is creating something beautiful, because I think beauty is so important. As I mentioned before, there's aesthetics, and this book falls into that. And there's also the beauty of the human heart. And all through every element of OnePlate that we have created, from the farms for these children to the book to the website, is aimed at creating beauty in order to show these children that they're loved, that they deserve the same amount of respect and dignity of anyone, and from making sure that spoon is straight to setting the table beautiful, because these recipes have been styled so beautiful, the tables are beautifully set, and so are what the children are served. It's served beautifully, the tables are beautifully set. And in fact, these recipes are amazing, but what these children are eating from these farms, like, they're so healthy, like they're really good, nutritious, organic produce, and that is so important for us, is that it's nourishing food.
Yeah, and absolutely brilliant. And so obviously the cookbooks are playing a big part in OnePlate moving forward. Are you still, so before when you had the restaurant, the $1 going off as well, are you still maintaining that as well, or is it mainly cookbooks now?
Yes, so it is still ticking in the background, but we only have a few restaurants and cafes because it's quite until we can automate it. It's quite a job to do, and we're all volunteers.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we're focused on the cookbooks. So our hope and goal is to continue the dollar a menu item and continue the cookbooks. And our goal for this cookbook brunch in London is to sell 20,000 books, which means we would raise $1 million for our projects. And for us, it's a beautiful synergy, because it's celebrating the amazing restaurant and cafe scene in London and building these beautiful projects with our partners for these children.
So clever.
And that was going to take me to my next question, which is and you touched on it there, is is that a tractor? Sorry, it's really loud. I don't know if it's quite good timing. But in terms of how the actual business operates, because you've mentioned, for example, as well, you don't take a salary, or none of the people involved take a salary. If it's not too much of a direct question, so how does that work with your personal situation? Is this what you're doing full time, or do you do something else? But also, what does the business actually really need? Because obviously I'm guessing money all the time, I'm guessing, to fund these projects, but it'd be great just to get a bit of an insight into that side of it, if that's all right.
Yes. So for me personally, I actually do some consultancy and strategy work freelance on the side, which is fantastic. So that allows me to be able to do OnePlate volunteer. And OnePlate, we're so fortunate because we have some angel donors who fund our administration costs. So our administration costs are low because we obviously don't have wages, but those angel donors are able to fund those admin costs. And we're always needing more angel donors for that side of it. And then we had an extraordinary philanthropist who funded the production costs of the cookbook. So the cookbook, it's over 400 pages. There is a lot of production value in it. And this philanthropist funded the production costs of it.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
So really, the more people that you can get involved in the organisation who can add to that, the better, basically.
Yes, angel donors, volunteers, yes. And I mean, this is the other thing. OnePlate, it's been built on the generosity of volunteers. And this is something that I love, is that every single person has a gift or a talent that can actually help and make a huge impact in the world. And often we think what we have is so small, but it actually is quite big. So OnePlate, from our web designers to our accountant, who are all doing it volunteer, their skill is actually making a direct impact in the lives of those children, from the number cruncher to somebody coding on the website to somebody putting together a MailChimp EDM. All of those skills helps these children because OnePlate has been built on the generosity of those volunteers, and together we can all make a difference and an impact through that. And I think, that's what I love about the title of your podcast, There's Another Way. I love it because we can do things in such a different way, in such a different creative way, in a collaborative way, that there might be a listener here thinking, I really want to help. Like, as we all are heartbroken by the statistic of those children living on the street, listeners might be thinking, I can't go over there. I don't have time to go over and volunteer. Or I actually couldn't go over because it would break me. Or I don't have the money to give, but I want to help some way. What can I do? And there is another way. You might be able to build a website. You might be able to start a podcast. You might, however small it is, there is another way to be able to make a difference that might seem small to you because it's a natural gift of accountancy, whatever that might be, but it's huge for somebody who is building and creating something, and big for those children.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So if someone's listening out there who thinks, I can do something, I've got a unique skill set, how can they reach out to help? What was the best place for them to go if they wanted to find out more?
For OnePlate, our Instagram account, oneplate.co.
Okay. And
also our website, www.oneplate.co, and please feel free to email us. So our email address is on our website as well.
Okay. Amazing. Well, I work in the food and beverage industry, and there's lots of contacts on there, so I'll certainly be sharing the podcast with those guys. And obviously the link to the cookbook as well, because I think it's just a wonderful organisation, and for an incredible cause. It's absolutely beautiful. So,
but I think also as well, it's the reason I ask is as well what your personal involvement in this is, and don't take this as a negative question, but I guess do you feel sometimes how do I put this? You've obviously invested a huge amount of time and energy into this. Do you feel, do you feel like in terms of your life balance and sort of ambitions, do you feel like, what am I trying to ask? I'm trying to kind of, because I totally take your point. I think there's a lot of very good people out there who don't know how to help. I would actually say I'm probably one of them. I care deeply about a lot of things, but sometimes it's like, how do you help? My brother set up his own charity where he took homeless people off the streets of London, and then he bought a farmhouse in Devon, and then took them off the street. And the only one condition is that they weren't allowed to take drugs, but they were, again, growing food. But again, huge project, huge undertaking. What you've obviously done is a huge undertaking. It's almost, I guess, a career in itself. Do you feel like, in terms of your own personal aspirations, you've had to sacrifice things, or how do you feel about it? It's a bit of a long-winded question. I hope it makes sense.
Yes, no, it does. It makes complete sense. And it's something that I'm aware of, because I think balance is really important, because I think I'm here for the long haul for OnePlate. And if I am, then I need that balance in terms of lifestyle, health, wellness, creativity, other passion projects. Otherwise, I think I would burn out. And I think it's important to have that balance, because it actually then allows more, I suppose, passion and creativity for OnePlate, which is definitely a mission. And then the other things that I love doing, of different hobbies and different passion projects, and still dabbling into design and things like that, which I really do enjoy, can actually feed my creativity for OnePlate, and OnePlate can feed that as well. So I'm a really big believer in having a holistic life, because looking at all different areas of the arenas of our life, of family, of friendships, of health, of wellness, of creativity is so important to keep us moving forward, to be the best version, to be able to show up in our best way. Otherwise, I think I'm giving my whole heart to this, but if I'm giving my every whole ounce of my day to it, then it could be something that would be, I've seen it before. I can easily see people burn out from that, and it doesn't become sustainable.
It makes sense. Well, I mean, again, I think we could talk for hours about probably so many different things, but I guess to be respectful of your time, I guess maybe we should start to wrap up. And actually, looking at that book is making me really hungry. But, but I mean,
me too.
I mean, I think from my side, again, it's hard for people listening to this not seeing you. I mean, it's really inspirational, I think, what you've accomplished. And I don't think many people would go into the situation that you went into and then take on, and push it forward like you have. And I think even just meeting you, your warmth and your spirit, I think is absolutely incredible. So it's been a real joy to be able to hear this story. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy to be able to be here with you both.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I can't wait to get stuck into some of those recipes. And
yes.
Yeah, what an incredibly inspiring story. Just hearing all of that has just been unbelievable. And I hope everyone enjoys it as much as we have having you here. So thank you for that. Just to finish, we always ask the same question, but if you could go back to your younger self before you set on your travelling days, with all the knowledge and experiences that you've had, and which have been outstanding, and you could give yourself one piece of advice going back in time, what would that piece of advice be, do you think?
Oh, that's so good. What would that one piece of advice be? To love great and not hold back, just love great.
What a great answer.
Yeah, fantastic. I don't think we can say much more after that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Thérèse.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Best of luck with the cookbook, and we'll put that on all of our channels and make sure every person we know has a copy in their house for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Let's never ever go to sleep again. Wait, I think I'm starting to fade again. I don't want the end.